Thank you. Yes. Welcome everyone to the new Gara Paint and Pigment. This is our new location. This is our first talk at the new location. So you're nice and tight in here, but I think it works well. I'm Saren, and we're here with Leslie Diugood's screen printing class from Cooper Union. Yay! Thank you for bringing all of you lovely people. And we're going to just talk about what we do and how we started and all that. So the business started in 1985. Actually, 1986 he got his license, so I say 1986, but technically Art Gara founded the business in 1985. And I have a little painting of him here that our wonderful artist friend Carrie Skozek made. So this is my friend Art Gara. He founded the business. He was an artist and a muralist in New York City. And he was really frustrated with the quality of paint available to him at the time. So he came up, he would have to go down to the hardware store, and what they did was squirt out the color into the paint base and shake it up for you. And that liquid color that will come out is called a dispersion, which is a liquid pigment concentrate. And so he had this idea, I want to make dispersions and give them to artists and use really great pigments rather than what's available now. This is not very good. So he set about doing that. And back in those days, you could actually call industrial companies and ask questions. It was before 1-800 numbers. In fact, sometimes we joke that he was the reason for the 1-800 number because he will just talk your ear off. So he learned a lot of information that way. He also discovered these really important pigment Bible books on the street called color index manuals, and he just was fascinated. So he just set about learning all this stuff. And then fast forward, I started working for him in the 90s, and at a certain point it became clear he needed help. I brought my husband in, and we became his business partners in the year 2000. So we lost Art about 3 years ago now. God rest his soul. But my husband and I continue on. We've been doing this for, like I said, since 2000. So we continue to make these wonderful things, which are dispersions, and that is what we specialize in. This is what sets us apart. So what I haven't said is that we are art materials, but we are what we call ourselves is a paint component system, which sounds really fancy and technical, but it's really just, we give you the parts that are normally in a pre-made paint and you mix it yourself. And all that means is you take your dispersion, which is your liquid pigment concentrate, and then you choose your binder and you mix them together and you make your paint. So it's really simple. And then there's and the benefit of that is you get to control the saturation. That's the primary benefit, I feel. You can add that as much color, as little color as you want, and it just gives you that much more control. So I really believe in this. I feel like this is an opportunity to be able to make the best possible paint. That said, I can just, go to the color chart. So in the color chart here, this is our wide selection of dispersions. And these are all ground in-house. We just went downstairs and looked through the viewing window and saw the large selection of powdered pigments that we have, because of course all colors come as powders first, and then they have to be ground properly. And this is an example of the difference between why you need to grind pigments. This is a dry powder, just kind of loosely mulled into a binder, i.e. a medium. That's sort of an interchangeable term. And then on this side is the dispersion, which is the ground version. So you can see how once it's properly ground in the mill, and we have these big ceramic ball mills, which is the old-fashioned way of doing it. Nowadays they use high-speed mixers, which is just like a steel blade that spins around, but it doesn't bring it to an 8 grind, which is the finest grind. It's called a Hegman 8. And the Hegman 8 is what really releases the color and lets the pigment do what it was intended to do. It releases it to its full potential. So you get the most luminosity, the greatest transparency if it's meant to be transparent, just the most vibrancy. And so this is a good sample. Did we get it on the camera? Okay. If you want to pass that around to look at that more closely. So back to the color chart. Up here are a lot of, so we're also pigment collectors. Yeah, when Art Garrett discovered those pigment color index books, he learned a lot about pigments at a time when nobody really knew much about pigments, or the fact that pigments come from the industrial market. Like, pigments aren't made for artists. They're made by large suppliers for large industry, automotive, plastic, stuff like that. So he figured out that there were so many of these pigments that, although they weren't known of specifically in the art world, they were great because they have the highest light fastness, the best tinting strength, all these things. So that's what's important. So a lot of these colors up here, and we've notated them with little stars, are extinct. They're no longer made anymore. But we happen to have a large supply still. So there's some on every single row here. And I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to maybe get into mixing, I think, straight ahead. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate the paint component system. You start with a binder. I'm going to use acrylic. Actually, this is a brand new batch of acrylic that Jody just made. So I've got it in this container here. Looks like that. I'm going to put on some gloves.
Are the pigments bad for your skin?
Well, we like to say all paints are chemicals and to be cautious and careful, but you don't want to get any kind of chemicals into your skin. So some are more hazardous than others, like metal pigments, cadmiums, cobalts, things like that. Especially you don't want to get on your skin. But I just wear my gloves all the time, just to be safe. It's what's called a chronic hazard as opposed to an acute hazard. So even if you were being sloppy, not that I recommend being sloppy, it would have to be a buildup over time of getting heavy metals into your system. Okay, so to make the paint component system, you start with the binder. I already have some here. Then you grab a color. I'm going to use this Benzodiazole R5R. This is one of our extinct colors. This was made, we got a call actually by the company that made this. This was designed for Porsche apparently, and then they just didn't quite like it. So they called us and we picked it up because it's a unbelievable, super strong, super beautiful blue that goes to the violet. And it is probably the strongest color we have.
What does that have?
What's that?
Strong and what's
Oh, tinting strength. So all pigments have properties by their nature, and one of those properties is tinting strength. Yeah. Okay, so you can see. Now, acrylics are milky when they're wet, but they dry clear, so that's always going to dry darker. But because I can add as much color as I want, I'm just going to add a little more for the purpose of overcoming the whiteness of the acrylic while it's wet. This color, when it's at full saturation, almost looks like black. It's so dark. All right, so that's all you do. It's really simple. You mix it up, and then that's your paint. And so we have a lot of people that use our binder, i.e. medium, for silk screening. In that case, because we use very high resin binders, which dry a little quicker than you might be used to, you might want to add a little water or a little propylene or a little propylene glycol. This is a general drying retarder, propylene glycol, to prevent it from drying in the screen. Or you can just use somebody else's silk screen medium and put our dispersion straight into that, because a lot of people do that too. Just depends on your preference. Now, I know we've got other people that aren't silk screeners and maybe like texture. We're big texture people. I'm going to show you an additive called thickener number 1. So I can, if I want, thicken this way up. So if I add that, that changes the viscosity. I think I said that we use only high resin binders. So this is actually a very high solid content, the highest solid content available on the market. What that means is it's got a lot of resin. So that you see that thickener, how that thickened that way up. It feels a little bit more like oil paint because of the high resin content. And then we have another thickener, number 2. Yeah?
Is it glossy at all?
Yeah, so I have a dried sample here. It's very glossy. So this is 1 stroke, this is with the thickener, and then this has a little metallic added to it, liquid gold. And it dries soft too because of the resin. This is really strong. This is like super glue. Of course, you can use these things clear as a glue if you want. You want to pass that around? Okay, then I've got a second thickener. This one is called thickener number 2. When you use it after thickener number 1, it changes the feeling to make it really feel more like oil paint. It gives it a little more drag, a little more like honey. Let's see if I had more. I ran out of material, but you can kind of see here. We go. It makes it like kind of stretchy, more like a tar gel when you add that second thickener. So with this system, you're kind of like an amateur chemist, and it's a lot of fun. You have a lot more control over what you're doing, and it's just entertaining. And we really feel like,
Wow.
you see that? Sorry, I should have had more in the leftover to play with. We really feel like if you're more connected to your material, you're more connected to your artwork. And this is an opportunity to be more connected to your material because you're basically making the paint yourself, but we make it easy for you to make the paint yourself.
How long would you say it takes for this to dry?
Well, again, these are water-based paints, so they dry relatively quickly. They dry actually a little quicker than what you might be used to because this is mostly resin. So this is going to start setting up a skin, 10 minutes really. But if you want to increase the open time, you add a little water with probably propylene glycol, which is that retarder I showed you. Okay. Oh, you know what? The one thing I forgot to bring is paper towels. Okay, I'll just put that here. All right. So what else do I want to show you? Got a lot of dried samples here. Here's another binder we have. Oh, and this is with Prussian blue. We just released this. This is a soluble Prussian blue. So this is extinct, one of our extinct colors that isn't made anymore. But this is the original. If you look on our Instagram, there's images of all this stuff. And the binder this is in is urethane. So you see how that's self-leveling? So that's like no brush stroke. Urethanes give you a smooth, self-leveled surface, kind of like enamel, whereas acrylics more hold a brush stroke. So what binder you use is going to determine the surface quality of the paint you make. What pigment you use is going to determine the transparency or the opacity. So that's another one of the properties of pigments. You've got your tinting strength, you've got your transparency, opacity, light fastness, all the things. Okay, this is another sample of, what do we got here? Ultramarine R6 in silica flat, which is our very matte binder. And this is with a little bit of water added. This would be what it looks like. Actually, this is a sample, a multicolored sample that Aiden's been making as she works on the color chart. So she'll take a stroke of the paint and put it on here. So this one is super matte. It's got 2 sides. It's got a lot of fluorescence on that one. If you want to feel that, it's like an acrylic gouache. So that binder there is called Silica Flat. This color here is Ultramarine R6, which is a turn of the century true French ultramarine that we happen to have a lot of. And again, if you look back on our Instagram, there's a photo of the original packaging of this, which is really cool. It came from a company called Reckitt's, which was the original manufacturer of ultramarines in England.
Where did that come from in England? Like, where did they source it from? A cave?
That was when they first figured out how to actually manufacture it from, synthesize it in laboratories and stuff. Yeah, that was the beginning of being able to do that. Okay.
You guys can ask questions.
Yeah,
too.
shoot
I have
questions.
plenty, but I think
I'm gonna show you the sparkly stuff. All right, here is, I'm gonna do the sparkly stuff in the urethane because, we'll do the glossy one. Because the urethanes are clear when they're wet. So we don't have to wait for, and of course water-based paint will get dried stuff in the cap, so you gotta clean that from time to time. Okay, so again, making the paint, start with your binder. And again, you don't have to use our binder, you can use somebody else's medium that you might have kicking around, and you can just add the color to it. Okay, let's grab a different color. Let's see. Phthalos have some of the strongest tinting strengths. These, and there's an indication on the bottle of the tinting strength. So this is tinting strength. Yes?
Have you guys ever provided ink to like cars? Because there's like cars that ink only, like they could only provide it in like their factories, like very limited.
So a lot of these pigments are actually automotive pigments. And you're probably talking about, well, see, I don't know if they're water-based or solvent-based now with those particular systems for automotive, but we all get our pigments from the same manufacturers, basically. We just happen to have collected a lot that are no longer made, and you can only get with us now. But whichever company you're talking about, it's basically the same kind of sourcing, although this is a larger topic that I could get into, but maybe not now. But the whole manufacturing of pigment at a certain point got outsourced, and then the quality went down, sadly. So you do have to be very careful where you source pigments from. So maybe I'll go back on what I was saying, because I just don't know where other companies are getting their pigments from. There, you have to be, as I say, you have to be very careful. So we only get our pigments from companies that have been around for over 100 years, the manufacturers. Yeah, we are very snooty about that. When we have to buy them, but we happen to have a giant collection of stuff that's super old, and again, from the original manufacturers when they really knew what they were doing, and no one was cutting any corners. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question. Does that sort of answer your question? Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna put a little phthalo in there. I just put like a little drop.
Is it Phthalo blue or?
That was phthalo green blue. So because they're at their finest grind, they're super strong. You see how that one little drop just kind of exploded?
Yeah, that's nice. Can you talk about the difference between the phthalo families, the cadmium families?
Sure, yeah. So there's some general pigment classes. Let me lay some of this down while I do that. You've got your inorganics, which are your metal-based pigments. Cadmiums, cobalts, chromiums, that sort of thing. Then you've got your organics, which, as Art Guerra used to always say, doesn't mean brown rice. It means organic chemistry. So those are made with a carbon atom. And that's basically all your other pigments, your fancy name pigments, your perylines, phthalos, indanthrons. So many. Okay, let me put a little, okay, now, it's hard for me to talk and paint at the same time. I'm gonna put a little Super Shine Silver in there, which is a metallic.
Oh, the best.
Oh, and then the other, this is a metallic concentrate. Everything we sell is a concentrate.
This is the best.
And this is stuff that they use in automotive paint, for sure.
Leslie, is that what you used in that scene? That kind of the silver?
Yeah, these BNL. That was yes, that was Super Shine Silver.
Okay.
With black, with one of. What, do you have a graphite?
Oh yeah.
I did graphite plus Super Shine Silver.
Wonderful.
And then there's the
So
two
that's
color.
what the Super Shine Silver added. Can you guys see that? So you can turn any color metallic. Well, you want to use a transparent color. Let's go back to the color chart because I'll show you that.
Can you explain why there's 4 different versions of the same thing?
On here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just exactly what I was going to do.
Sorry.
So, phthalo green blue, I think, is what we just did. So the way you look at this chart, the whole chart is done the same way. Oh, and let me say that the third pigment class would be the earth. So we talked about the inorganics, which are your metal-based pigments, cadmiums, cobalts. The organics, which are your fancy name pigments, naphthols, quinacridones, pyranthrones, everything else up there. We have a huge selection of the organics, which are the ones bound with the carbon atom. And then we got your earth colors. So those are the 3 general pigment classes. So the way the box works, this whole chart is painted the same way, is the top line has the pigment dispersion fully saturated into the acrylic 65. This chart is painted with the acrylic 65, which is the high resin acrylic we sell. Multi-purpose, you can do a lot with it. You can thin it down, you can water it down up to 8 times, you can thicken it way up with thickener, you can use it alone, you can use it to use it clear just as a glue, or super saturated to make it just a heavy duty paint. It can also hold a bunch of texture, so all those samples on the table with all the thingies in them, that's with the acrylic 65. So again, getting back to this, I digress. Top line, phthalo green blue, fully saturated into the acrylic. So the top line shows you the undertone and here's the mass tone. The top line is going to let you know whether that pigment is transparent or opaque by nature. So phthalos are very transparent. Second line is thickened up. We're looking at mass tone. Huge difference in the transparent colors. In the opaque colors, not much of a difference from undertone to mass tone. Third line has 10% white added, start to show you the value range. Fourth line, about 20% white, so we've got a jump in value, gets lighter here. Of course, there are infinite amounts of different values that you can get going. Last line has that Super Shine Silver I just showed you on the table. So the Super Shine Silver works best with transparent colors. So you can see it really pops in the transparent colors, goes kind of dead in the opaque colors. They make between 8 and 16 times their volume, depending on the tinting strength of the individual pigments. So that's what we were talking about before, that pigments have inherent tinting strengths. So phthalos are some of your very strongest, earth colors are some of your weakest, cadmiums and cobalts pretty low too. The organic pigments that we talked about before tend to have much higher tinting strength and also are generally much more transparent. The metal pigments, as this probably makes sense because they've got metal in them, they're more opaque. So, any questions so far? Yes?
What's the rarest color you have?
Oh, there's so many. So many. Well, one of the cooler ones, this is not extinct, but this one is stealth bomber pigment. So this actually disappears in infrared lighting. It's called perylene green black. It's super awesome. But as far as, rare, amazing colors, we've got over 50. So it's hard to say. There's so many. Everything is starred up here. So we could go down the list. Sadly, Zoic Plum Violet is totally gone. We keep them up there as relics. Most of them we have a large supply, but occasionally we do run out. Oh, that one should not be starred. Vat Bordeaux. That's a beautiful, deep, winey red. We've got Fire Ruby Red. This one's super awesome. Mayan Carmine, Zoic Carmine, Anthraquinone Red, Quinacridone Rose Madder, Quinacridone Pink Madder, Quinacridone 195. Transquin Red Blue, Transquin Red Yellow, which are really interesting quinacridones that haven't been made in a long time. Alizarin Red, Chromafol GR, Chromafol Ergazine Red Medium, Red Hot HFT, Vat Paranone, Sandarin Dien, Perazo Quinazo, Isoindolin Red. All the isoindolins are no longer made and we still have quite a bit of them. Anther Red, Parathrone Scarlet Deep, Indo Double Scarlet. We have just a ton of that, and we're grinding that right now. We just emptied that. I'll be posting that on the Instagram later today. More Isoindolins, Chromo Orange 4R.
Are any of them unstable? Like they don't archive well? Do they change
So the
over
Prussian blue is not stable in acrylic. It is if you make it and use it, it's fine. It's not stable if you want to mix it and let it stay in the acrylic wet, because the acidity of the acrylic will change the color. In fact, where did I put that paint out somewhere handy? Kind of cool. I painted it out, what happened to it, and the color is actually really interesting and beautiful, but it's no longer Prussian blue. It's like gone quite green.
But the like fluorescents don't they?
Oh, fluorescents are not light fast.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where you get fluorescents, they're just not light fast. They're really poppy, they're cool, people like them. You can make them more stable by adding a transparent color to it or putting a UV varnish over it. That can help. Just keep it out of ultraviolet light.
Which is all around us.
All around, yeah. Let's see, the other thing I didn't talk about, and I know you guys aren't necessarily texture people, but are all of our, this is another thing you can do with the acrylic 65, it can hold a bunch of texture. So you can make really solid textures that don't necessarily look like gel, like you can buy pumice gel or glass bead gel, but you're gonna see the gel. Here, if you mix it and use it, you don't have to use much acrylic because it's so strong, and then you just see the texture, solid texture. So that's what all these little samples are. And the way you do that, we can do that really quick. We sell all over there in the deli pint containers are all these different textures which you see that have been made into a paint.
You can print with things that are textural. We talked about mesh counts. You have to have a certain micron size. And
Yeah.
that indicates the micron size a lot of the time too, right?
This one may work. It's a very fine glass bead. The glass beads are cool because they're reflective.
Yeah.
And especially if you add a little of the super shine silver to it, the metallic, it gets extra reflective. So yeah.
It's like what's on crosswalks.
Yes, yeah, they use this in the road paint. So the way you work with the dry texture, I meant to have some water in the thing, but oh well, I'll just do it this way. You want to just wet it slightly with water so it's dampened. So it looks like wet sand.
And these are glass beads.
These are glass beads, yeah. Then you add about 20%. Well, I like to add a little dispersed water, which I don't have up here. Yeah, when you're using dry texture, you should really use dispersed water, which is something that's in all of the dispersions already. It helps to wet particles and helps them to separate from each other. Oh, thank you. Would you grab me a small dispersed water, Marco?
Sure.
Thank you.
Is that something you can buy from the store?
Dispersed water? No, but you can buy it here.
Oh.
It's called a surfactant, and it's, as I say, it's already in all paint, but we sell it to you separately. So if you want to make paint from dry pigment, which a lot of people like to do that, you do want to use some of this stuff. This is again surfactant, and it's already in all of your pre-made paint that you buy, and it's in our dispersions.
Like it just doesn't have minerals and stuff and mess it up.
Minerals?
Like it's different than normal water because it's like pure.
Oh, it's like an industrial soap, actually. It's like a detergent. It just helps wet things. So it's going to allow me to use less acrylic. It's less important with something like glass beads that are very easy to mix in, but things that don't want to accept water, like the tire rubber, you would definitely need that. Pigments themselves, depending on the pigment, some are much more difficult than others. It's always a good idea to use it. It just makes things easier. So then you would add about 20% acrylic and just mix it up. Till it's creamy. And if you wanted it to be more fluid, then you would just add some more acrylic, or probably a little more water too. Again, this acrylic is so high resin, you can add a bunch of water and it's still going to be a great binder. Okay, so I like to make it kind of thick, but maybe I'll make it a little bit more fluid. So I can use the brush. There we go. Now we can do that just by itself on the paper, so that will dry to be the clear bead. And then of course we can add color to it. Let's see. Oh, let's go with the Perylene green black I was talking about.
Do dispersion dyes mix with like dye? Like if you're textile?
So our dispersions, pigments, good pigments are not dyes. Dyes are typically not light fast. So I'm just gonna add a couple drops. But you can definitely stain things, tint things with the actual pigment dispersion. Right.
So it's shiny and a color. That's hard.
That's also kind of oil painting.
Yeah, well, it's not gonna be, this will not dry
The way it,
too shiny because it's got so much particle added to it. Let me see, and now I'm gonna add a little of the super shine, why not?
And the gold versus the super shine, what's the difference?
Oh yeah, the gold. The super shine is made with aluminum, so it's more opaque and more metallic. The gold we sell is called liquid gold. And
liquid gold.
yes, liquid gold.
It's gold. It's the goldiest gold I've ever seen.
It is made with a glass particle, so that is super shiny. Okay, let me just put this over here. All right, oh, thank you. And let's see, here's a dried sample of the liquid gold added to the blue, which turns it kind of this really cool greenish color. And I have another sample of it here. Here's the liquid gold I'm about to show you, dried, painted out over black. So again, you're controlling the concentration you're adding because you're adding it yourself. So here is less concentrated, more concentrated, and most concentrated. And it's super sparkly because it's glass.
It's this finest pigment sparkle too. It's not like some clients don't want to see glitter, but this is like liquid.
Yeah. And also, it can be interesting to add the sparkly stuff to a matte binder because it tones it down. I have a sample here somewhere that shows that. So it's much more subtle. Oh, that's the glossy one. Oh, here's the liquid graphite painted out. If anyone wants to see that, which you can then buff up.
What does that mean?
What's that? Buff it, like rub it, and then it makes it gives it a high sheen. Okay, here is the liquid gold into the silica flat, so it's much more subtle. So, yeah, so it just depends what you're going for.
It kind of gives it a
Yeah, teensy bit. Here's another sample of the liquid gold mixed into, oh, this is impression blue.
I kind of did the answer, but like, will you explain why are metallics so much better over dark things than over light things?
Oh, is it the light reflection?
The metallic's better. Well, it depends what you're using.
Like your sample for gold, for instance, is over black. It wouldn't be as fun over white.
No. Yeah, a lot of the interference powders and things that are transparent, they're meant to go over a dark, and then that brings out the color. Like, yeah. In fact, let me show you that on the interference page. Here's in addition to selling a lot of dispersions, pigment concentrates, we sell a whole bunch of pearl powders. And this page shows all the interference colors. So on each of these chips on the left, this is black, and on the right is just the white paper, and then you can really see the pearlescent color of the individual hue pop more when it's over dark. Like, so this is a interference violet, but you really see the violet more when it's over the black, if that makes sense.
Can you explain why it's called interference?
Interference, that typically refers to things that kind of do what's called a flop, depending on how you view it, what angle you're viewing it at. So it's just kind of pops one way a little bit more than the other.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to touch it.
You want to pass that around? Any more questions so far?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Another one. How do you regulate between matte and glossy, especially in screen print? Because from my point of view, it's usually they're really much more glossier than I want,
Okay.
and I want to put them in more matte.
So
direction.
there's different things you can do. One would be the base that you're using. I'm sure they make a matte base. So, or if they don't, we have one for you.
Yeah. So the question was like, you have the matte base.
Yes, we have the matte base. For screen printing, you want to add a little water and propylene glycol to that to increase the open time and make it a little bit, lower viscosity for your purposes. But the other thing is, if you were to, because this is not a paint, right? These dispersions, these are liquid pigment concentrates. These dry back to a powder, and the powder itself can actually act in matting things a little bit. So if you were to use a bunch of this in your glossy binder, that would probably take down the gloss a little bit.
There's also powder flattening.
There are
things,
matting agents, yes, that we sell.
but it affects the color in a lot of ways too, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. So there's many, many ways to go. And we're happy to, if you have a specific project, people always come here and say, I'm trying to do this and I can't get it to quite work, and then we'll walk you through it on a one-by-one basis. Anybody else? Questions?
We have
Questions?
about 10 more minutes.
Okay. Yes, no, maybe. Otherwise, we can just break out the books. So here's more crazy books of all the different glass beads. This is a glass bead book. I always pull this out because it's just really fun.
Those are big beads.
Big beads. I'll pass that over there. And we've got our pumice book. We've got giant pumice boulders, pumice rocks, extra coarse pumice, medium pumice, fine pumice.
That book looks heavy.
Yeah. Anybody want to check out that book? Then we've got all our glitter paint patties over here. Let me see. Let me go through my samples and see if there's anything I wanted to show. This would be an example of the difference between using the same color in a gloss versus a matte.
Yeah.
This is also one of our extinct colors, this beautiful pale Luna moth green, cobalt nickel green. Not gonna find that anywhere but here.
Who are some of the artists you work closely with?
What's that?
Who are some of the artists you work closely with?
So many.
Yeah.
So many. I feel like I'm probably not supposed to list off names, but many blue chip artists, and all kinds of, from students, mid-level, all the artists. Oh no, I got wet. Oh no, Aiden's gonna be mad at me. Yeah, wet paint on her sample. Oh no, I ruined this one too. Oh, it's that. That's the culprit. Brr. This is quinacridone gold. This is a super popular extinct pigment that very few companies have anymore. We happen to have a whole bunch of it. And we just released a deeper version of it, a little more red. Okay, manganese blue, super extinct. People love this one. This is the difference between gloss and silica flat.
What's that one called?
Manganese blue.
Do you guys have any works from artists that use these paints in house?
Here
Sorry.
on the mezzanine was my large painting that had all the texture and the floral stuff. That I use ultralight, which I didn't show you, but that is this stuff. And this actually feels sort of like frosting, which lends well to using the pastry bag. It's what led me to use the pastry bag. So, but some people use this thin too. This is actually made with some micro glass beads. So this can give you a lot of texture that's very lightweight, or you can use it thin. As I said, some people just use it to have the very matte, beautiful, it sort of looks like ceramic, the surface. Oh, here's a sample. Some people make alcohol inks with this stuff. This sample's a lot going on here, but this would be the dispersion mixed into, to make the alcohol ink. You can go a couple of ways, but this is with our water-based urethane and some alcohol. And let's see what else. Manganese blue. Here's a painted of the Indo Double Scarlet, which we just ground. This is a extinct red. Super beautiful. Here's a sample of hollow ceramic spheres, which is a cool filler. Painted out, yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And it's shiny.
Yeah. I wonder if there's glass beads in there too. This is a really cool material, this ceramic. Okay, here's a wacky mixture of beads and urethane and wow, liquid gold. Yeah. So basically, sky's the limit. When you're making your own paint, you have a lot of more options of things you can do. And we're happy to help you figure out how to get there. And
Good.
here comes the paint maker. All right.
Sergio. Sergio, I think you're gonna like that one.
Oh, here it is. Here, this is what happens to the Prussian blue when you let it sit in acrylic. It turns to this color, which I think is a beautiful color. Yeah, it's interesting. But it's stable in the other binders, but it's not stable in acrylic because of the acidity. Again, it's stable like just sitting in the dispersion form, and then if you can still use it with acrylic, but you have to mix it and use it. Once it cures, it's fine. It's going to last forever because we have color charts from 30 years ago. It looks great. But you don't want to let it sit in the acrylic or you're going to get this color unless you want this color. And I'm thinking I want this color for my own painting. This is a cool color. Any other questions? No?
Sorry, what was the question?
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
What's your spectrum? I know you have a really wide spectrum of colors.
Yeah.
How does it compare to someone like Coleman's?
Well, we have over 200 single pigments, right? So all pigments have, and again, back to the color chart here, you see in this right-hand corner, these pigment numbers, all pigments have universal pigment numbers. And that tells you whether it's a mixture or it's a single pigment. These are all single pigments. A lot of companies are selling some single pigments, but also a lot of mixtures. Especially something that's called a hue. They're using that if it says hue on a paint tube, it means it's a mixture. Hue in the general, art realm refers to the color grouping, like red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, but when you're talking about paint, it means it's a mixture. So when people ask me what's the difference between you and other paint companies, I say it's like apples and oranges because that's pre-made paint, we're make your own paint. So they're two very different things. At the same time, you can easily make great pre-made paint. We just encourage you to do it yourself because we feel like you're going to get more from it. You're going to become more in tune with the paint, therefore in tune with the painting. You get greater control, pure color, all the things.
Thank you so much for
All
showing
right.
us.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
And again, we're here to help you. If you have a special project, you need to figure something out, just talk to us and we will walk you through it.
All of these work well with the inks that we have in school too, so you can
Yep.
have an ink and tint it a little bit more towards the direction.
Thank you, Kaishan.
No problem.